Oh, wow. Okay. That is quite a bit of a all right. Anyway. Okay. Well, welcome back to another episode of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. Uh, if you're not familiar with this, since I actually am using a different platform at the moment, since I'm at my home office and not doing the video in my vehicle, uh, I am using something different, and hopefully, this is quality enough for what you guys have come to expect with the channel. It is still evolving regularly. This particular channel is not geared towards the I am right about things as much as it is about the experiences of living. That's what the whole concept of growing up in the wilds of suburbia is all about, the experiences of living. We all have different ways that we view the events that we go through. A lot of us have the archetype of the way that things are supposed to go, which I mean by that is that there's a particular set out way of experiencing something specific, right? Like relationships are, if you go by the archetypical type of ideas of relationships, a lot of those are inherited views of the way a relationship's supposed to go. If you followed my channel at all, or if you know me in person, you know that I will tell you quickly that relationships are nothing more, nothing less than agreements between you and someone else or whomever else is involved. That's what relationships are. If you think about it, whenever you get married, there is the vows that you take, and those vows are something that you typically would write for yourself about what you're dedicating and declaring between yourself towards the other person, and then vice versa. That's what it is to have an agreement. That's what those relationships are based off of. Well, life happens to happen. It happens around us as experiences that we navigate by, and it can either be what we expect it to be, which is based off of what we have come to believe, which can very well be something that somebody else told us that it should be. You would know this because when you discuss things with somebody and they tell you specifically that uh, that light is awfully bright. If they tell you specifically that that there are certain aspects about that relationship that you should be upset by, that in itself is telling you that there is a viewpoint that somebody else has that you should have, and that is the agreement aspect to it. So if you have that experience, then you should likely be aware that somebody else views relationships a little bit differently than you do. Now, this particular episode, I wanted to do it on self-reflection, avoidance, and or self-reflection, just avoidance or directly taking it on. So, with avoidance, most people say, well, then I've gone through this, so therefore I don't want to ever go through that again. And then they don't, they avoid that particular thing, no matter what it is. Now, if you're willing to accept what you've gone through and open to growing through it, you will take on, how can I get better at this thing? But first, take self reflection. What is it that I am personally responsible for as I deal with this particular type of experience? Now, for myself, an example, recent situation, and if you follow the channel for the last 4 to 5 episodes, you'd realize that I am continually speaking about a recent breakup, if you will. Uh, I'm not faulting anyone. I'm looking at where I bear my responsibility and looking for all the responsibility that I can burden. I'm not in a fault giving state, nor have I been. My state has been more about what is it that I didn't do that would that created the outcome that it is. So with that, it has been an interesting discovery. This adds to character. It builds into who we are becoming and who we've declared that we want to be, as well as the unknown for the variables that we react in a certain way, that we don't know we will react whenever we're in a better state of mind, if you will, or in more of a confident state. So typically, relationship ending usually brings a lack of confidence about yourself, which could lead you to want to relieve that pressure by blaming somebody else for shortcomings in that relationship. I am not of that type of ilk. I come from a different perspective, and I choose the burdensome need and desire, the burden of self-reflection, where I can be responsible. So, if we continuously live through life where we create avoidance, which is passing the burden on to another, then you're likely to continue to experience similar or the same type of results. Jordan Peterson will tell you that if you hear the same complaint from three different people, then likely your complaint is not about the other people. Or if you have the same complaint about three different people, then likely the complaint is you yourself, not the other people. Or if you hear three different people having the same complaint about you, it's likely that it is a valid complaint. Now, it's a matter of how you actually decipher that complaint and what you do about it. Their complaint can very well be just born in frustration, where if you work on it, it's not likely something necessarily of frustration. That's just a symptom to get you to look at it. It can very well be that there's something there to work on that you really do need to take into consideration, take stock of it. So, myself, I prefer that I always try to create powerful relationships, meaning that I do have a lot of conversation that takes place in those relationships when they're forming and throughout the process. Now, I have started using specific distinctions like dragons, Pandora's box. Really, those are distinctions to just give you a better understanding as to what it is that I'm speaking about once you wrap the ideas around the parameters. So, a dragon is something that will scare you away from facing it, whatever it is, the thing that makes you, the thing you're afraid of facing. Usually you're afraid for a reason. There's something there. That thing could be loss in your life. It could be whatever. Pandora's box isn't necessarily something you're afraid of. It's something that is emotionally you may have forgotten about. But it usually has reasons around it not to go back to it. And inside of it, the emotional thing, you may have experienced something at 8 years old, 9 years old, whatever age it is, and then you stopped maturing on that subject or that feeling that is presented by the subject, the topic, whatever it is. You just don't want to redirect or reestablish something with that. So you say, I don't want to experience this this thing again, and you lock it away. And then if it's ever opened again, you may revert to being 8 years old in a maturity level when dealing with it, completely shut down and inability to directly deal with that thing, whatever it might be. So that's actually that's Pandora's box. When you open it, it's chaos, and it can disrupt the mature human being that you currently are when that thing is opened. You don't always open it on purpose. Sometimes you open it because, let's say, I don't want to be emotionally connected with somebody at that level ever again. It was too painful. It hurt too much. I've created my own Pandora's box in this way multiple times in my life, and then I go back and reopen it, and then it doesn't open with chaos on the forefront. It's opened with chaos on the back end, because it comes with the excitement and the desire and the pleasures and things like that are the reasons to open the box in the first place. But in my experiences, it's never been I'm opening Pandora's box. It's more of I have not allowed myself to feel these feelings before, or I've limited my exposure to these feelings because it always ends in such pain and misery and discomfort. And that be the chaos that comes out of it, because when that type of emotion is present, it's hard to stay the mature person people expect you to be, where you may engage in high degrees of, intellectual and engagement with people. When you're going through those hardships, it may be very hard to stay or to get off of anything other than the emotional upset that you experience with it. So then you find yourself caught up in the chaos of I'm imbalanced. I'm unwell right now. I'm not stable, consistently stable on the same subject, and I jump subjects. I talk about something that helps get me away from those challenges that I've gone through recently and the pain of emotion, loss, and then you jump back on, you go onto another subject and be like, oh, do you see what Biden's doing, or whomever, like whatever political distraction or whatever thing can be distracting you. Then you eventually drift back into that emotion, the emotional conversation, and you seem like you can't stay on one particular subject long enough. That can be erratic to other people. So that, again, destabilizing your relationships with other people, because it looks like you are struggling to stay on the same subject, and you may be something that people want to move away from because you do occur to be fairly unstable. So It's a pretty dynamic conversation, easier to engage whenever somebody else is asking you questions of curiosity or adding to it so you can explore it a different way with other people. I do enjoy doing that myself with others because I do like to help create those kinds of dynamic conversations to explore. Sometimes it's self reflection at that moment. Sometimes I've reflected on it and I can reflect with the other person in their world. Uh, uh, so we can avoid the things that we don't want to experience in life, or we can take it on and make sure that it doesn't become a larger box, a Pandora's box. Now, if it's pain that you're avoiding or fear, then likely it's its own little dragon, the thing that you don't want to face. But your integrity sits on the other side of it. The life fulfilled sits on the other side of it. Now, for me, I always want to be aligned with my integrity. I always want to be at the center of what integrity is to me, which is the most honest and sincere and the most truest form of myself, which means it's the person that will face any uncomfortable conversation. It's the person that will allow himself into uncomfortable situations. I'm not constantly looking for the satisfaction concepts in life. I'm also looking for the areas that I can improve upon, the areas that I have less maturity in, the things that I'm afraid to seek out, the things that make me not want to go into the darkness, because in the darkness, the monster lies that may get you. And this be the monster of true intimacy, the monster of true connection. That's where I want to be. It's uncomfortable, it's emotional, it is in, even now drawing up emotion. But it's something that's awake in me that I don't want to lose. I want to completely develop into it. I want to go after that thing. I don't want to avoid it anymore, because continuously avoiding it will create chaos in other people's lives, because I'll point the finger at other people when things don't work out. Um, I'd rather bear the responsibility, face the shortcomings, um, where I allowed my own personal little dragons to be born. Face those things. They're not as scary if you face it. Uh, that's what I prefer. I prefer to continue to mature. The things that people find attractive in me, and attractive in more than just the sexual experience, or the sexual desires, but attractive as a person. Why do people want to be around me? Why do people like to talk to me? This is why. I don't think I'm all that great. I'm not that person. I'm driven with hubris or high degrees of arrogance. I try to be somewhat humble, but only humble enough, that I can allow other people to understand who I am by expressing who I am, but not so much that it suppresses another person with intent. I don't intend to suppress other people. I prefer to help cultivate things in myself that inspire others to cultivate it within themselves and bring it out, so that they themselves can realize other parts of their life that make them feel like they're living all out. So I want to live all out. That's why I do what I do. Face those hardships. I bear the burden. It's worth your time. Bear the burden. That's what, in religious concepts, for people that follow this, I'm more of a Jefferson Christian, if you will, an atheist in some ways. A Jefferson Christian is probably the most accurate description. I don't have the idea of a supernatural father that's above me. I look at those as parables, as conversations of ways of getting stories to translate over time to people. I absolutely value religion, specifically, Christianity, as a large part, but I take values and appreciation out of other religions as well. I find that they're desirable, and not only desirable, structurally necessary for us to coexist. I see what happens when we're without God because of the new atheists and what they do, and they're just embodiments of chaos. I am not that person, although I have traits and values that can align with them. If anything, hopefully I'm a lighthouse, a beacon to draw them into something more structurally stable so that we can coexist. Because they say they want coexistence, but they create hardship and division and hostility and destruction. And I don't align with that. And if they, for the people that I have had alignments with that don't see the same way that I do, it is not a personal matter. It's more of a survival for the species matter, that I do what I do and say what I say. And I have taken the route that I've taken, and I align more with the religious than I do with the non-religious. just simply because of the chaos the non-religious seem to be presenting now. So I take on the hardships of those relationships. I will pull value out of the Bible and Scripture, not as speaking as I am a person of Scripture as much as I am the values of what Scripture offers. And there's a lot to be said about bearing the burden, like Jesus bearing the cross be burden that he bears into life, that gives value and meaning to life. There's great suffering and hardship, but life is covered with that. We have it all over the place. When we get attached to something and it doesn't come to fruition, we get hardship because of our attachment, the burden of not actually experiencing what you want. And then if we point our finger and say it's because of that person, you're codifying the opportunity to become nothing more than pushing the boulder uphill. But the uphill doesn't have a destination to find a downhill. It's all uphill from there. You're constantly going to create more reason to be separated from somebody else and continue to fight against yourself. Bearing the burden means that you can correct those issues in life. You can find out where what you wanted to accomplish wasn't successful, and you can go back to try again. But you can try again with looking for another perspective, another viewpoint, another opportunity to get better at it so that you can get further. You can create that thing that you really deeply want. That's my process. I choose the burden because I know that, like working out, the burden will give me something that I want in time. And I'm patient enough and I'm stubborn enough that I'll keep doing it. And I hope that people find that same inspiration through this channel and through seeing what I do with growing up in the wilds of suburbia. I'm not here to tell you I'm right. I'm here to tell you that I feel that I'm right from what I've seen in my own life, but your life may not present that same truth. But it might. I'm not coming from that world. I'm coming from the world that I want to bring us together. But I also want to bring us together to get there and not create more division because somebody else didn't do what they said they were going to do. That happens. People agree to do things with you, but they're agreeing at the levels of maturity that they themselves possess. It's not that they're villainous people or creatures. They're just coming from where they're coming from. They may be making that agreement with their 13-year-old self, even though they're in their 30s. Their 13-year-old self stopped growing because of a pain experience that they went through. But the excitement of finally being able to experience the other side of that thing, whatever it is, they see other people experience it. We can say love is an example, or intimate relationships. We can say, I want to experience those things. I see it. It's on Hallmark. It's at Disney. It's in the movies. It's in rom-coms. It's in all of these things. I want to experience what love is. But you stopped pursuing it when you were 13. But you keep looking at it with this desire that you find it. So you keep softly involving yourselves with other people, and whenever it doesn't come through because you don't have the skill sets to fight through the disagreements or the ability to navigate beyond the upset, and then you abandon the relationship and blame the other person, and then you go around these narratives, forgive the language, but some people go around with the saying that men ain't shit or women are only about whatever, and that's not true. You're talking about other human beings, but you're narrowing them down to specific attributes of that human being. And then you build these walls and barriers to prevent yourself from experiencing what these other people are, simply because you yourself weren't able to face that thing that created pain. And you stop there. And then you go off like a wrecking ball into somebody else's life as you continuously try to find the thing that you feel like is a lottery to find. Anyone can be the one. Anyone can be the one. How hard are you willing to work for that thing to be true? Just because somebody doesn't seem to have the skill sets or the abilities right now, that could be the one, that you're not willing to work through what they need to grow through for them to be that person for you. It's not about coercion. It's about present the opportunity. It's like a farmer. You create the soil for somebody else to develop within. be the guard of yourself, but at the same time, allow yourself to grow and allow the other person to grow. Anyone could be the one. Anyone. But are you willing to work for it? Or do you want to continue to create, lottery opportunities? The excitement that's in the very beginning when you meet somebody in an intimate relationship. You don't know how they are. You don't know their smell regularly. You have the very limited exposure. Touching them, the excitement whenever you get a hug or the slight glance of touching you when they pass by, and all of that in the very beginning. There's like this heart sensation where you get some anxiety, and it seems to validate you to some degree, and you get excited about it, and then you're like, yes, there it is. There's that thing. It will go away over time simply because your sensory system doesn't know them yet. You don't always have that sound of that becomes familiar to you about them. The visual and what they look like and how they dress and how they carry themselves and the body language, that's visual cueing. You don't have all of that in the beginning. So it's so fucking exciting because there's so much to be discovered. There's the mystery to discover. And then that's why you get these excitements. You get a text and you're like, oh my God, it's that person. Then you're like, yes. Or you get the phone call, which is becoming less and less common now. And you're like, yes, I got a phone call. And you're like, yeah, I love that thing. And then you get attached to the early experiences of that person. And then as it starts to fade out, because you realize maybe they like reading things you don't like to read, but you didn't know that in the first couple of months. The sexual experiences, it's really exciting, and they're discovering you and you're discovering them, and, the places that you do things and the way you express yourself in a sexual way throughout the process. And then as you get more and more familiar with yourself, then it becomes less and less frequent and less exciting. And then before you know it, it's becoming a chore. It's becoming something that you just kind of have to do, or they're going to find it elsewhere. Or it's just like, this is what relationships are supposed to be. These are what typically inherited relationships become. They're always exciting in the beginning. That person looks like the person that I was attracted to when I was in high school. I had a poster about them on my wall, or, Kelly from Saved by the Bell. She was gorgeous and I like her, and she looks similar to her, or Zach, from Zach Morrison, whatever, from Saved by the Bell, and he looks like that person, whatever it is that your preferences are. And you find somebody that shares those values or those perspectives or those expressions, and you're like, yeah, that's what I want. And you start into that relationship, and then before you know it, on average, it takes 2 years before the honeymoon is over. And then the truth of the person emerges out of that. And then that's usually also the timeline whenever emotion is so well established between you and that person that you'll start coercively allowing yourself to be trained into becoming whoever that other person, your partner's idea of you is. And then you'll allow for specific things, the lack of affection when you do something that goes against their desires or their preferences. You pull away from them. They pull away from you, and it becomes this coercive relationship. You do this or that. Instead of loving who the person is, you're loving the idea of the person. I've been there. Anyone can be the one, but you cannot create that as the reality. You have to create the acceptance. Try this on when you enter into another emotion or relationship of intimacy, or try it on with who you're with now. Ask them without giving any cues whatsoever, and do not tell them what your definitions are. Do this before you ask them. How do you define love? What is the definition of love for you? Ask yourself that. Write it down. What is love by definition to you? For a lot of us, it's undefined. It's this thing that we keep pursuing, but we don't have a definition. If you wish to find it, you must define it. And if you can't define it, you won't find it. You'll find things that give you validation about you, where you feel important in somebody else's life, but it really makes you feel good about you. And that is misconstrued to be love at times. Yes, it's a part of love in some instances, and I'd say a lot of instances. But if that's the thing that makes you feel loved, that's not love. That's self-validation. Somebody else presents the environment for you to self-validate, but that's not love. But By itself, it isn't. Define love. What do you define it as? You need to be able to write it on paper and feel like by writing it, that is true to you. Not what the definition in the dictionary is, because that's not how you define love. If you have to look it up because you don't know, there, great place to work. I wouldn't use the definition in the dictionary. I wouldn't do that because you haven't yet. Why would you start now? If you decide from now moving forward, but most of the time, what's in the definition, what's the definition in the dictionary, may not fully resonate for you, and it won't feel right when you try to find it. So finding it, define it. Then ask your partner to define it without you telling them what your definition is, and see if they line up, because that may be a direct glimpse into the future of hardship. But at least at that moment, you can find out where your work is, because anyone can be the one. The person you've been with for the last 10 years can be the one. You don't have to say, well, you know what, I'm getting tired of this. There's plenty of people that want me in my life. What are you doing to facilitate what you're asking your partner to facilitate? I don't get recognized. I get my hair cut, and he doesn't notice that I get my hair cut. Well, have you noticed the other things in his life? Maybe if you notice that he walks around rubbing his back after a long day of work, maybe he's got a new tool belt and he likes that thing. You don't even know about it, but he's wearing it in front of you. He's looking at trucks online because his is worn down and he's wanting a new one. And you're like, oh, we can't afford that. But you don't know a thing about why he wants it. You just say we can't afford it. Or go get it. I don't care. It's like there's other things. It's not all about the female-centric views of relationships, which is what we've all become accustomed to because Hallmark talks about it. Disney accentuates it. There's a lot of things that are the female-centric values of relationships that should be honored and valued. And I agree they should be, or they could be. And in my experience and what I've really enjoyed is I do enjoy those things, recognizing that stuff. But there's a whole nother side. Men are not being appreciated the same way as we had been, and men are not being appreciated to the equivalent level of women now. Men are being told what they have to do, but not what they actually could be accepted for and validated for. It's more of what they're not doing. So with this, define what you want, and you have a better chance of finding it instead of trying to play the lottery. But it's up to you. You do your thing. It's your life. I'm not here to tell you what to do necessarily, but if you choose to watch this from beginning to end, you may find a great degree of value in it, and that value can make things more rewarding in life. A life enriched is a life well lived. Not a life rich is a life well lived, because there's plenty of people that are incredibly financially wealthy. They're not even close to satisfied in their life. Create the life you want. Work on it. All right, you can avoid life, or you can pursue those hardships. Find out where you can overcome them by working your way through it. Mature yourself. Treat it like you're trying to lose weight in the gym or build muscle. Work hard for what you want. Work for it, and you will have a more rich life. But if you avoid it, it will continue to reoccur. What you resist persists. Yeah, I think this is a good place to stop for today's episode. Again, I hope that you've taken a great degree of, I hope you've got something out of this video. I know that I have, and I hope to see that, people share in the comment section about this and see what your thoughts are. So in the meantime, remember, we're all here to live. Let's live all out. Let's really try to live a life well lived. Again, I'm Sir Chad Everett Broshears. I am the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, and I do hope that you take something out of this and that you take another step towards your life. Live into your life. Until next time, this is Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. Talk to you soon.